How's it going, everyone? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you for joining me. Now, normally in my videos, I talk about geopolitics and global issues like Russia and Ukraine and the rise of China. But in this video, I want to talk about something different. And I want to talk about drugs, specifically marijuana. Now, I'm somebody who would consider himself to be generally libertarian. Not 100%, but I definitely lean in that direction. And so when we started to legalize marijuana in the United States on a state-by-state basis, I generally was okay with it. For one, I don't want our police resources being too tied up chasing down people for smoking pot. And secondly, because in my very, very, very distant past, back in college, I too used marijuana, and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever done. Now, I stopped in my early 20s because I was fairly useless when I smoked pot. I got nothing done. It didn't add anything to my life in a positive way. So I said, you know what? It's time to move on and stop doing this. But everybody's different. Perhaps you use marijuana in moderation and you live a very productive life. And if you do, great for you. But I did not, so I had to stop so I could be productive. But now that we've seen marijuana be legalized, and in my state, Maryland, we have legalized marijuana not just for medical use, but also for recreational use, I initially was like, hey, no problem, right? But I have to admit that ever since then, I haven't actually liked the result as much as I thought I would. For one, we're starting to see all these pot stores pop up everywhere. And you see the traffic going in and out, people running in there to buy their pot. And we're also starting to see more public use. So people go buy their pot and then they're walking down the street in the city, smoking their dope. And if you're walking down the street, you can get this whiff of marijuana in the air. And I don't have kids, but I can imagine if I did, if I was walking down the street with my family, I wouldn't want my kids to walk through clouds of marijuana smoke. But you are seeing that more and more often now because of the legalization of marijuana. And while smoking pot in public is not illegal, there is no enforcement. The police, they don't do anything, especially since this Black Lives Matter stuff happened. They are not going to pursue somebody for smoking pot in public. And my issue is about, one of my issues is about decorum, because in the past, we generally kept our vices behind closed doors. We all had them, now and 50 years ago and 100 years ago. People have always had vices, but we did a better job of keeping them, in private places, at home or in establishments that were for that vice. And that allowed us to have in public a better public, a more civilized, clean, and nice society. And now we're seeing that completely change, not just with the marijuana smoking in public, but if you go to New York and Philadelphia, there's people on the sidewalks with needles hanging out their arms, and nobody does anything about it. So while we're, again, I generally support legalizing marijuana and not having the government overreach, I do see this social decay and this public display of just debauchery that I don't think is a positive thing for society. And if I were to look at my friends, people I grew up with, acquaintances, I would say that the majority of people I know who have passed away, it was related to drugs and or alcohol. So again, while I don't want a government to overreach, I can't at the same time say drugs and alcohol are good for society. They are not, but they're something that we tolerate because people have choice. And I want to ask the audience, you guys, what have you seen since marijuana has been legalized if you live in the United States, in one of these states where marijuana is now legal? And for people in other countries, what are the laws in your country? And what have you seen yourself as far as society with drugs being legalized or more readily available? Leave something in the comments there. I'm really curious to hear this because I want to know generally how people feel about this change in our society as far as the use of drugs. Now, there are countries that are much more stringent. Malaysia, for example, up until recently, they were executing people for drug offenses, for drug trafficking, although they recently stopped executing people for non-violent drug trafficking offenses, which is, I guess, reasonable. But the reason they were so tough in the first place was because things were so out of hand that the government freaked out and I guess, overreacted by bringing these really, really harsh drug penalties. But they saw firsthand in Malaysia what happens when drugs proliferate to a great extent and how that can be damaging for society. So again, I'm libertarian-ish, but at the same time, I look at drugs generally, and they don't make any place a better place. I don't think anyone can make that argument. Again, alcohol too, not good for society, but at the same time, you step in and ban alcohol? We tried that back in the 20s in the United States. Didn't work out well, so we moved away from that. And so again, I don't argue for complete government overreach and knocking on doors to see if you got marijuana or anything like that. But I do wonder about how this is affecting our society generally, and how is this good for our children who are growing up in this new era where drugs are so readily available. Now, I want to move on to the issue of cartels because that ties in with our drug issue here in the United States. Now, there was recently 4 Black Americans that were kidnapped in Mexico. 2 were unfortunately killed. And there was a huge response from politicians in the United States. And this response was so huge that even the cartel got a little nervous, and they allegedly turned over the people responsible for this kidnapping, which was kind of funny. They were all lined up there, tied up, and they said, "Hey, sorry about this. This was not cartel sponsored. Here are the guys who are responsible. Do what you want with them." But again, the response from American politicians was ridiculous. We had one of my favorite morons, Lindsey Graham. He wanted to, take military action against the cartels. There were other people on talk radio, mentioning we should have missile strikes and launch some tomahawks at these cartel locations. And you can't do that. That is a violation of international law. But I will say this. These cartels, these are paramilitary organizations. They have ex-military members in their organization. So they are, in effect, again, military-like organizations. And what we've done the last three decades clearly has not worked to stop the cartels. So something has to change if we're going to make a dent. And the response from the Mexican president was also interesting because he got all indignant and said, "You're threatening the sovereignty of Mexico." But then in response as well, he says that he would appeal to his countrymen in the United States who have voting rights and tell them not to vote for Republicans, which is kind of odd. He's essentially saying that Americans of Mexican descent would vote for somebody in the United States based off of who the Mexican president tells them to vote for. So he's saying, don't infringe on our sovereignty. And his response is, well, I'm going to infringe on your sovereignty by telling people who to vote for. Kind of funny. And again, he's talking out both sides of his mouth. And so the question is really, why do the cartels persist to this day? And obviously, there is corruption in Mexico, but as an American, And watching these cartels and these videos online of what they do to people, it's worse than ISIS and Al Qaeda. I mean, way worse. These are really nasty cartels, and we're not doing anything about it, it seems, in any constructive way. And the question is, why not? Because clearly, if the United States wanted to stop the cartels, we have the power to do so. Look how we responded to Russia invading Ukraine. The Uniparty got together, $100 billion. Boom, we're over there supporting this war in Ukraine, thousands of miles away. But as far as our own border, where we have a paramilitary organization operating, killing people, smuggling drugs, we're not doing much at all. And again, the question is, why not? And so if we can stop them, but we're not, that must mean we want these cartels to operate. We want these drugs coming over the border. Is it because of corruption and bribery? Do the rich in the United States want their access to cocaine and other high-end drugs? Or does our U.S. government want drugs in our society because it operates like Soma? The book, A Brave New World. What was their mechanism of control for society? Soma, people who are drugged are very easy to push around and turn into cattle. And that's sort of my concern with the drug issue, whether it's marijuana, whether it's the cartels bringing across fentanyl and cocaine and heroin. Drugs in society make it easier for a government to control. And just my observation over the last 5 years, this influx of drugs has really damaged the United States. And the question is, again, what do we do about it? Do we continue to legalize drugs because we want to be libertarians and respect individual rights and watch our country go to hell in a handbasket? Or do we pull back a little bit and try to rein it in a little? I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know the direction we're heading right now is a little excessive. And so while I want to be a Mr. Libertarian, I go, something has to change because this is not something we can continue forever. It will help to destroy our country in the long run. But again, in the comments, leave me your thoughts. I know, again, I'm saying I'm a libertarian guy, and then I'm saying, hey, we should do something about this. So I know I'm kind of talking back on my own self. But give me your opinion. Tell me what you're seeing with your own eyes and how you feel drugs are affecting the society that you live in, whether it's here in the United States or in another country. I'd love to hear it. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.